Hello.
Our story begins on Starkiller Base as Han Solo and Chewbacca have placed the final charges inside of the base. They were preparing to leave when Han saw someone from his past, his son. Many thought that his son was dead, consumed by Kylo Ren and Snoke, but Han knew that Ben was still alive. And today, Han made a choice. He called out to his son, yelling his name across the large catwalk. The name Ben echoed out through the entire facility as Kylo Ren turned, telling Han that he's been waiting for this day for a long time. Han told Ben to take off the mask so he can see the face of his son. Kylo did so, removing it and telling Han that his son is gone. Chewbacca watched from the balcony in fear. He remembered Ben as a small boy. The two of them got along so well. Rey and Finn watched from a balcony as well. Both of them were fearing what was to come. Han was telling Ben that he is not gone, and that Snoke is only using him for his power. The two of them got closer and closer to each other, until Kylo said that he wants to be free of this pain. He knows what he has to do, but he doesn't know if he has the strength to do it. Han gave his son a gentle smile, saying that he will help him. So Kylo held out his saber, and Han grabbed it with him. The two of them locked eyes, and Han realized what was about to happen. He didn't move or act. He was helping his son. And right as Kylo was about to twist the saber and ignite it, he sensed someone. A presence he hadn't felt since. Before Kylo realized what was happening, two stormtroopers were pushed off the ledge, and Han was suddenly pulled away from Kylo, landing safely on the ledge as a green lightsaber ignited. Luke Skywalker stepped out onto the catwalk, telling Kylo Ren he will not let him kill his own father. Many hours ago, on the Octu Island where Luke resided, he ventured into the Mirror Cave. This cave was strong in the dark side of the Force, and Luke was seeing if his own darkness still haunted him. And once in the cave, Luke saw himself. He was completely alone as a First Order fleet invaded the galaxy. The bodies of Leia and Han lay dead as Kylo Ren and Snoke reigned supreme. The conflict that Kylo Ren felt with his father completely faded as he now stared at his uncle Luke Skywalker, the man Kylo blamed for his fall to darkness. The last time Luke saw Ben, he reached into his mind and saw terrible darkness. Snoke already had him, and in a split-second decision, Luke ignited his blade, only to realize a second later that this was wrong. He was left with only shame. He'd almost killed Ben, the same way he almost killed his father aboard the Death Star in anger. But before Luke could explain everything, Ben collapsed the temple, and when Luke woke up, everything was burned. Leia and Han blamed Snoke, but Luke blamed himself, and he went into exile to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. But today, he was here to correct his errors. He helped create Kylo Ren. Now he must help destroy him, before he destroys more of what Luke loves. And as Kylo stared at Luke with anger, he saw the man who was afraid of his power. So Kylo ignited his blade. The cracked crystal sounded even more eerie in this huge room, as he yelled at his former master. He told Luke he could not live with his own failures, and it has brought them back together at last. Kylo Ren suddenly leapt across the bridge, slamming his lightsaber down on Luke, and Luke blocked it, holding their sabers together. Kylo twisted his blade, searing Luke's robes with one of the cross blades, and Luke flipped out onto the bridge, removing his top robe. He held the green saber out in front of his face now, telling Kylo he will do what he must. The two of them moved at each other, as Kylo swung aggressively, clashing blades with Luke as Luke backed up, letting the fight come to him. Kylo's anger put him off balance, and he swung past Luke, suddenly stumbling to his knees. But as Kylo got back up, he screamed at Luke now that he hates him. He told Luke to do it, finish him off like the murderer he is, give in to his fear, just like his father, Darth Vader. He's just like him. And as Luke held his saber above Ben, these words reached deep into his heart. The words nearly destroyed him. On the Death Star so long ago, Luke was strong enough to throw his saber away instead of giving in to the hate. He was not his father. So as Ben waited for Luke to strike him down, he instead heard the lightsaber de-ignite. He looked up at Luke, who had tears in his eyes, as Luke threw his saber off the ledge, just like he did on the Death Star. It fell away, and Luke told Ben he is terribly sorry. Luke reached out a hand, telling Ben that the dark side has caused their family enough pain. Sidious, and now Snoke, have controlled their lives forever. It does not need to be that way anymore. Luke asked Ben to come with him, come back with him and Han, find Leia. Ben was still on his knees, and he was tightly gripping his lightsaber. Now was his chance. He could kill Luke, then kill his father. His turn to the dark side would be complete. He'd finally be a Sith. The conflict in Ben's head was horrible. He looked to his lightsaber, then he looked to Luke's hand, and then he felt a new hand on his shoulder. It was Han, and with a smile, he told him, "Come on, kid, we'll do it together." And with Luke in front of him and Han behind him, Ben let go of his darkness. He felt accepted. He stood up, and Han took the lightsaber from his hands, throwing it down the cavern as Ben turned and hugged his father for the first time in what felt like forever. Luke was feeling the light side of the Force again, and for a second, he thought he saw the ghost of his father smiling at him from afar, but it faded quickly as Han said they have to get out of here. As they left the base, Chewbacca set off the explosions and opened up the base to be destroyed by the incoming X-Wings. As Luke, Han, and Ben met up with Chewie outside, they asked where Rey and Finn were. Chewie said they went to get the Falcon, so Han activated his comlink to ask Rey where they were. Rey answered and said she thought the X-Wings could use a quick hand, but they'll be there to pick them up in a minute. Han shook his head, saying that girl better not scratch his ship. And inside of Starkiller Base, Rey joined Poe and the X-Wings in the final seconds before the base fired. She aided Poe in destroying the base as the Resistance fighters flew out of it at the very last second. Rey and Finn flew to where the others were waiting, picking them up as the entire base was erupting from the inside. The Resistance did it. Ben looked out of the window of the Falcon now, as the exploding base, the exploding planet, felt like his own darkness burning away. He turned back to Han and Luke as the ship jumped to hyperspace, and Chewbacca gave Ben a big hug, roaring with happiness to have his friend back. Ben was happy to see Chewie too. He turned now to see Rey and Finn. Rey gave him a bit of an angry look, turning away from him. She didn't have a connection to Ben like the others, not yet at least, and she couldn't just forget that he watched as the First Order blew up the entire Hosnian system, including the capital of the New Republic, Hosnian Prime. Trillions of lives burned away so the First Order could claim its place in the galaxy. Finn felt awkward around Ben. They'd worked together before, but on the other side of this war. So Finn jokingly called Ben a traitor, to which Ben said, "You too," before taking a seat behind Han. Before Starkiller Base completely blew up, General Hux went to Supreme Leader Snoke, waiting for instructions. Snoke felt this giant shift in the Force. Not only has Luke Skywalker returned to the galaxy, but he's taken Kylo Ren back from him. Snoke was beyond angry, but he had to play this the right way. For now, he just ordered Hux and his fleet to meet with him, as they put together new plans. Despite the loss of Starkiller Base, the First Order still had hundreds of starships in its massive fleet, with millions of soldiers from its years building up in secrecy. The Resistance was broken, having only 30 true military ships and just hundreds of soldiers. The entire New Republic defense fleet blew up with the Hosnian system. The First Order was spreading into the galaxy to take control. On Dakar, the Resistance base was here, and everyone waited anxiously as the surviving X-Wings, along with the Millennium Falcon, landed safely. Leia watched as Han, Chewie, Rey, and Finn exited the Falcon. She was so relieved they were all okay. But then something magical happened. Luke, her brother, descended the ramp and gave Leia a big hug, before Han came up to her and said someone else is here to see her. Leia turned, slowly seeing Ben walking down the Falcon with his hands up. The Resistance members all started to notice. A few of them lifted their blasters as Ben reached the ground. Some of them were calling him a monster, murderer, a killer, and so on. And they were right. But Leia and Han both hugged Ben together, telling their son everything will be alright. Luke Skywalker distracted everyone by just, well, being Luke Skywalker, the legend. He was still in a pretty dark place mentally, but saving Ben and seeing his friends did help quite a bit. He was able to excuse himself and get to the hangar, looking at what the Resistance has to work with when he heard a familiar voice. C-3PO hobbled over to Luke, exclaiming that it was so good to see him. Luke let out a laugh, telling 3PO he was happy to be here. And then, a small chirping and beeping could be heard, as R2-D2 finally woke up from his self-imposed retirement of sorts. He spent years on low power mode, after basically fighting 2 wars back to back, with little rest. His old circuits needed a break, and after losing both Anakin and Luke, he shut down. But today, R2 was so happy to be back, as Luke was happy to see him as well. Although the wider galaxy was not in good shape, with the First Order spreading its influence, Luke took this moment to allow himself to feel happy. As everyone in the Resistance was settling in after their victory, Supreme Leader Snoke was debating hunting down the Resistance when he felt something. It was some sort of calling, like a voice that always lived deep inside of his head, except now it was much more clear than ever. Snoke didn't remember the earliest years of his life. His earliest memories were when he was basically grown up, and he spent years traveling the unknown regions, fighting for power to his name. He remembered the fall of the Empire. As the story goes, Luke Skywalker walked into a room with the Emperor and Darth Vader, and only Luke Skywalker walked out alive. Snoke knew of Luke as a legend. The two of them had met before. Snoke had seen Luke's power, but over the years, as Snoke studied the Force and explored the unknown regions, helping to form this First Order, he often felt as if something or someone was guiding him from the shadows. And today, that voice was finally clear. The voice ordered Snoke to come to Exegol. His true destiny awaits him here. Snoke asked this voice how to get to this place, and the voice told Snoke that a ship will be awaiting him in the hangar, with some of his most trusted allies. So Snoke would make his way down to the hangar, and he found the ship belonging to the Knights of Ren waiting for him. They were given the coordinates to Exegol long ago, just in case a situation like this ever arose, as the man waiting on Exegol trusted the Knights to stay loyal to his cause. The Knights would fly Snoke out of the capital ship and into hyperspace, with the exact coordinates for Exegol plugged in. It was a very long trip, and Snoke prepared himself for what was to come. As they finally did land on Exegol, the eerie lighting and ancient architecture only gave Snoke more fear and curiosity as to what was to come. The Knights guided Snoke all the way to a suspended creature, clearly only living due to the machines he was strapped to. The creature called to Snoke in a raspy voice, calling Snoke his child, saying it was so good to have him back. Snoke looked around and finally began to notice what was all around. Vats of clones, and in some of them, clones of him. The reality that Snoke never wanted to believe was coming true, and a second later, 4 of the 7 knights pulled out electro whips, and snaring Snoke in their grasp, all 4 of his limbs were caught in these whips. Darth Sidious descended to the ground, telling Snoke he has served his purpose well, but his failure to destroy the Jedi will be his last. Sidious reached out his hands, and he began stealing the life force from Snoke for his own. When Snoke was created, Sidious deemed him too weak to ever serve his plans, and he was let loose into the galaxy, with the hopes of him someday growing strong enough to be useful. And now that Kylo Ren was gone, Sidious was using Snoke's power to bring himself back. But as Sidious did this, something changed. Snoke pulled the electro whips around his wrists, slamming the 2 knights together. He then grabbed the vibro staff of one of them, cutting through the 2 whips around his ankles before using lightning to kill all the other knights. Sidious realized his fatal error. Snoke has grown too powerful. Snoke looked to the other 3 knights running at him, blasting them with enough lightning to disintegrate them, before grabbing the vibroblade once more, grabbing it, throwing it through Sidious's chest. The ancient Sith gasped, and Snoke said he had his chance to rule. Now it is his turn. And the thousands of Sith cultists gathered here all fell silent for a moment, before yelling in anger, charging at Snoke. Snoke closed his eyes, feeling the power of this planet. It was surrounded by the dark side, and he called upon as much power as he could, blasting lightning through all of his fingers. The tendrils went everywhere, crashing into walls, killing hundreds of cultists every second. Lightning slammed hard into the ground, penetrating deep where a fleet of planet-killing Star Destroyers hibernated. Snoke's lightning struck the weapon of one of them, and without shields, a giant chain reaction began. Snoke felt the ground shaking heavily under him, and he took off, running to the Knight's ship, barely taking off as the entire planet went up in an explosion to kill off Sidious, his army of ships, and all of his cultists. Snoke punched in the last known coordinates of his ship and took off as the lone user of the dark side. Snoke took off back to his fleet, determined to bring the Resistance to a swift end and rule the galaxy, as the Emperor could not. And upon returning, Snoke was informed by Hux that the First Order was able to track Resistance recon ships all the way back to Dakar. They are confident that is where the resistance is hidden. Snoke was glad to hear this, and he organized a fleet to launch for Dakar immediately. At the base, Ben Solo was looking on in a meeting as the resistance was gathered to discuss their next moves. The galaxy has seemingly lost hope with the destruction of Hosnian Prime. No one is standing up to fight except for them. Leia was afraid it would take years of fighting to chip away at the First Order, but having Luke and Ben gave her quite a bit of confidence. As they were all talking, a Resistance spy ran into the room, telling everyone that one of the other spies just reported the main First Order fleet jumped to hyperspace en route to Dakar. Panic set in as everyone thought they were doomed. Ben Solo pushed to the front of the meeting and asked everyone to quiet down. Instead, the cries of fear only got louder, as Ben wasn't the most trusted leader. But as Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, Finn, and even Rey got next to Ben, everyone quieted down. Ben told the fighters that the First Order won't expect them to be ready for a fight. Their larger ships will be vulnerable right away to attack before they launch the TIEs. A single fighter can take out the cannons, at least with a good enough pilot. Han and Poe locked eyes, both knowing they were going to be tagged for this mission. The fight was organized. The main goal was evacuation. This would be organized by Leia, Finn, and Rey. In order to evacuate, the dreadnought cannons on the capital ship would need to be destroyed. This would be led by Han, Chewbacca, and Poe, and once the cannons are destroyed, Resistance bombers can deploy, distracting the ships long enough for evacuation. And through all of this chaos, Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo will infiltrate the capital ship and attempt to take down Snoke. It was a long shot, but this group of new and old fighters had done a lot worse in their time. Everyone got into positions, and as the First Order fleet emerged from hyperspace, Poe and Han flew their ships next to each other before separating to each handle one side of Snoke's giant ship. The Falcon and Poe's X-Wing perfectly maneuvered over the ship, catching the First Order off guard as they took down the cannons one by one. By the time TIE fighters were deployed, most of the cannons were gone, and Resistance bombers would make their run. The space battle was huge, as the First Order fleet scrambled to meet the Resistance in the air. The 6 other Star Destroyers here were being hit hard by the Resistance bombers, and they were forced to take evasive action. Rey was flying the main evacuation ship through heavy blaster fire, as Leia guided her from the ground. Rey was using her little knowledge of the Force, along with her piloting skills from Jakku, to weave perfectly between the ships and prepare her jump to hyperspace. But right before she did, Leia contacted her. She just had a feeling that Rey would still be needed, so Rey ejected an escape pod, flying back down to the surface as the transport jumped to hyperspace without her. Leia and the others cheered, and soon she met with Rey, handing her the lightsaber she once used. Luke brought it from Ahch-To, and Leia told Rey she believes she is ready. Go help Luke and Ben. She feels they will need it. In space, Luke and Ben were able to safely board Snoke's ship after flying through the heavy battle. Ben was gifted the blue lightsaber passed down from Anakin to Luke and now to Ben. As the two of them landed in the hangar, Ben ignited it as he and Luke moved through a wave of stormtroopers. Luke wasn't using a lightsaber. He never wanted to use one in battle again, but he mastered the Force and pushed through the waves of troopers with Ben, making their way through the ship and ultimately to the elevator where Snoke was waiting. The battle outside was rocking his ship, and as the elevator door opened, Snoke was waiting with his 8 guards at the ready. Snoke scolded Ben, telling him he was always just a weak little boy in a mask, but Ben wouldn't allow himself to be rattled. He was here to finish the job. The menacing red room was soon filled with the sounds of battle as Luke moved towards Snoke and Ben took on the guards. Luke's movements were swift and powerful, years of Jedi training evident in every move of the Force, and Snoke was a towering presence in his golden robes, countering with an unsettling movement, blasting heavy lightning at Luke, and despite his age, Luke was dodging to avoid these blasts, catching some of them, throwing them back at Snoke. The throne room was rattling, shaking under the sheer power, but soon, Snoke's overwhelming power began to turn the tide against Luke, pushing him back with the Force until he was hit with a lightning blast and sent crashing hard into the wall. Meanwhile, Ben Solo found himself surrounded by Snoke's elite guards. Each one was wielding a weapon with years of trained perfection. Ben fought with ferocity, his lightsaber forged with years of history, as he clashed with multiple guards at once. His training under both Luke and Snoke helped his abilities here, but the guards fought with synchronized attacks that Ben had not seen before. Despite his best efforts, Ben was gradually overwhelmed by their assault. As Luke struggled against Snoke, Ben fought valiantly, but ultimately succumbed to the sheer number and skill of Snoke's guards, leaving both Jedi in a moment of defeat against their foes. Ben was knocked to the floor as the guards approached him. Luke was struggling to get up as Snoke lifted his hands for the final kill, proclaiming today to be the end of the Jedi. But from behind Snoke, Luke saw the elevator door open as Rey stood inside of it. She locked eyes with Luke, throwing her saber through the air to him, and as Snoke was about to blast Luke with lightning, he caught the saber, slicing Snoke in half in a quick moment. Snoke simply looked down in shock and fell dead in 2 pieces. The remaining guard looked over, and Ben hit them all with a force push. Luke threw the saber back to Rey, and she jumped into battle right next to Ben as the 2 of them were able to take down the guards with each other in the light side. As they fought, Luke noticed their connection through the Force, and he wondered, could it be the prophecy's dyad? It was something he would explore later on, but for now the 3 of them used the controls in Snoke's throne room to guide his ship toward the other Star Destroyers. Snoke's ship collided and ripped apart the First Order fleet, and the 3 Jedi ran down to the hangar, escaping just in time, as Resistance fighters blew up the First Order fleet before everyone jumped to hyperspace for crates. Hux and the other leaders were gone here, going down with the fleet. It all happened so fast, but the main leaders of the First Order were destroyed. On Crate, the survivors of the Resistance would gather. They lost around half of their total army, but this was likely the best chance they would ever have to bring down the heart of the First Order. It was a chance they had to take, and with the heart of the First Order ripped out, Princess Leia Organa, the beacon of hope in this galaxy, was able to rally the people to fight back, and within months, the scattered First Order would be pushed back once more. The charge would be led by Rey and Ben, as Luke discovered they were a dyad in the Force. Their training together went so well, and they would help usher in a new era of Jedi, even finding Finn to be Force sensitive. Leia and Han would make up, getting back together, as Leia remained general of the Resistance. Han wouldn't be able to stop himself from getting into funny business still, even getting on with Lando again with Chewie. Han also reluctantly, so he says, helped mentor Poe even more into being an elite fighter, as Poe and Chewbacca formed a fun relationship. The galaxy was at peace again, and Luke Skywalker settled into his Grand Master role for as long as he would have left. And folks, that is our story for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It is sequels based, but I usually have, well, this is my second one ever, but I enjoy these stories. I do, enjoy the sequels more than I think most other people. So, hope you guys found some fun in this, even if you don't enjoy those movies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.